so-called rivalry back in the 60s, Rolling Stones and the Beatles. But I thought it was the Beach Boys, or maybe it was. I don't know.
Yeah, I definitely think that that of course people always ask you if you're a Beatles or a Stones guy.
Yes.
But no, I definitely agree with you. I will always say that it's Beatles or Beach Boys. Because Beatles and Stones, two different styles,
Yeah.
two very different bands.
Yeah.
But as far as experimentation and evolution go, you have the Beatles and the Beach Boys kind of growing at the same pace. Their
Right.
earlier stuff is very poppy, very bubblegum, very radio friendly. And then, as they get deeper into their own issues, their own experiences. I mean, you could say that both Brian Wilson of the Beach Boys and John and Paul were going through a very interesting transformation in the mid 60s.
Absolutely.
So yeah, no, and just out of curiosity, instead of the Stones or the Beatles, for you, is it the Beatles or the Beach Boys?
Beach Boys. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. No. Definitely. Instead of the Stones, yeah. I definitely think it's a question of the Beatles or the Beach Boys. Now, out of those two, what do you think? Are you more of a Beatles guy or a Beach Boys guy?
Oh, if I had to pick, it's a close one, but the Beatles. Yeah. And I mean razor close to the Beach Boys. And I love the Stones too.
Yeah.
It's just apples and oranges, different, just a little. Well, the Stones are more the bluesy kind of bad boys of rock and roll, where the Beach Boys and Beatles, a different thing. But yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. But those are the three bands that really lasted. A lot of those bands from the mid 60s fell out of the wayside. Like Dave Clark 5, but they were neck and neck with the Beatles back in 64, 65.
Mm-hmm.
Popularity. They were extremely popular. Then by 67, it's like, what happened to these guys? They didn't evolve enough.
Exactly. And I
changing and yeah.
And with that evolution, when you go to like the albums, I really think that if you look at Rubber Soul to Revolver to Sergeant Pepper, and I actually I kind of I brought them. I have my albums here. So we got Rubber Soul.
Yeah, there it is.
Rubber Soul.
Yeah.
And then you go to Revolver, which I think is one of the coolest album arts.
Lost Foreman, yeah.
Revolver. And then, the granddaddy of them all, Sergeant Pepper.
Yeah.
Those three really, I think show an evolution that no other band, I think, has gone through.
Yeah. Nobody at that time period, I don't think, was doing anything remotely that close to what these guys did, the Beatles.
Sure.
Yeah. So if I had to ask you a question on certain albums, Dave, Rubber Soul, like three of your favorite songs off that album.
Oh man. Well, I'm glad I have them here.
I know there's so many.
It's hard to it's hard to like really, I mean, I love the pace of Norwegian Wood.
Great.
I love Norwegian Wood. Just like the guitar and just the cadence of John's voice.
Yeah.
It's just it's such a great song.
Yeah.
And it's not in that, it to a Beatles fan, Norwegian Wood is great. But if you're not a Beatles fan, maybe you're not very familiar with Norwegian Wood. I would, ask you to go and listen to Norwegian Wood. It's a great song.
Absolutely. I've known people, friends of mine, that didn't know anything about the Beatles and played them a couple of the songs. He said, "Can I hear that again?" And ended up saying, "My God, where have I been? These guys are amazing," and turned into Beatles fans. But sure. Norwegian Wood's the type of song I've heard. I don't know. I got to check that again. That's a true story about John actually in Norway. I don't know if it is, but it's. I always listen to that song. I said, "God, did that really happen?" I don't know. But yeah, the sitar, George's sitar in there is.
Well, that's also another thing, that's a start of another evolution of not just writing, but of the instrumentation, of the different sounds
Putting
that the
that, they
Beatles.
weren't scared to do that. They just went for it. And also off that album too, In My Life, what a song.
Oh yeah.
John's oh man, what a beautiful song that is. But Norwegian Wood, yeah, that would probably be my favorite off Rubber Soul if I had to pick one song off that. And Abbey Road, if I had to, oh my goodness, something what a beautiful love song, George Harrison composition. Here Comes the Sun is another
Yeah.
one. Because You Never Give Me My Money. Uh The End, Golden Slumbers. Oh yeah, Octopus's Garden, love that one. Ringo
Sure.
sings on it. You
Sure.
know?
But with Abbey Road, I think too, it just the medley, the fact that
Oh
you
God.
sit and they made sure that these songs would just flow.
Yeah.
It's almost like one song,
yeah.
like the last 5 or 6 tracks, you
Yeah.
can just play,
Yeah, absolutely, Dave. That's a great point. On side 2, where they run one song runs right into their Sun King, the way it runs into the next one. And I think the concept of the album, I think that was the Beatles.
Oh yeah.
Everything was the singles back in '67. Sergeant Pepper comes out. People started really, well, I can't say Sergeant Pepper. I think Revolver started maybe with Revolver, Sergeant Pepper.
Sure.
Sergeant Pepper was the real big one where they didn't release a single. You had the whole album, and the whole album's fantastic. But Sergeant Pepper, I'd say my favorite, Day in the Life. What a masterpiece.
Mm-hmm.
She's Leaving Home.
That's a great one too.
Leonard Bernstein of the New York Philharmonic said when he first heard that, and this is Leonard Bernstein, said, "Oh, it blew my mind." And this is a guy that wrote West Side Story, New York Philharmonic conductor. But that's how important those guys are. But what about Meet the Beatles? You said that was the first album. What's your favorite tune off that? If you can.
Man,
I know there's so many great ones off that one.
I mean, I love I Want to Hold Your Hand, because that's actually the first song I remember seeing from the Ed Sullivan Show.
Most America.
That performance, and just like the bobbing. I just remember just watching, and John's just playing. He's just like,
yeah, I know, yeah,
and then you have George and Paul just shaking their head, and then just Ringo just back there, just kind of it was an image. It wasn't just a song. It was an image. And that's something too I think is really important, to think about with the Beatles. Is they were a whole thing. It wasn't just the songs.
That's right.
It wasn't just it was them. It was an experience. I think it was John Bonham who had an interview in the early 70s where Led Zeppelin finally took the Beatles off of like the #1 favorite band in England, something. Right. And John Bonham said that the reason that we are now #1 is that when the Beatles were around, people went to see the Beatles. People wanted to see the Beatles, and now they want to listen to us.
Yeah, I remember that interview.
With the Beatles, it was a whole experience where the early 70s, with Zeppelin coming out, it was much more about the songwriting.
That's right. Yep.
So I think that the Beatles became a whole other phenomenon.
Yeah. After Abbey Road, I think Zeppelin kicked Abbey Road out the #1 position. Zeppelin 2. I think that went down, and Led Zeppelin was born. The Beatles break up. Everything just happens and enter the 70s, But Let It Be album, if I had a favorite song, probably Let It Be off that one. And Long and Winding Road. It's hard for me to listen to that song. It's just something about it. It just makes me sad. I don't know. Oh man. And I like, you mentioned earlier about Phil Spector, though. I love strings. And a lot of people say, Donnie, I like it naked, like just without the strings, but I just love the strings in it. The Phil Spector, I think it was overdone. Phil Spector had that wall of sound, you know,
Oh yeah.
and with every group, like, oh my God.
Yep.
But yeah, probably not made for the Beatles, right? You know, so
Yeah, no, it's like, the Beatles laid everything down. Phil Spector went boop
yeah,
and all the sound.
yeah. McCartney wasn't. He was not. They wasn't happy with it.
Yeah, so that's why, I'll always say that this is my favorite version of
Oh
Let It Be.
yeah, yeah,
Let
yeah,
It Be Naked.
yeah.
Definitely. But also some songs on there. Dig a Pony is a great song.
Yes, yes.
One after 909.
Yep.
So you have these great songs that aren't necessarily huge in the outside of fandom,
Right.
but it's really hard to find a bad Beatles song.
It is. It is. The only one I can think of, and Revolution number 9, number 9, number 9,
Number nine,
number
number
9,
nine,
number
number nine.
9, number 9. I gotta play Elijah that sometime.
Yeah,
Number 9, number. It just it's just gibberish. I don't know, but yeah, the White Album had some weird stuff on that, but the Revolution they did well the harder one off the flip side of Hey Jude, then the slow version off the White Album too. They did that acoustic version
yeah.
of so there's 3 different versions of that. Sam Mendes, of course, the famous director of American Beauty, 1917, will be doing well, actually, it's going to be, you could say it's 4 Beatle movies coming out in 2027, I believe, on the perspective, like John's perspective of it, Ringo's, George, and Paul's. Probably will be filmed maybe the same, like coming out the same year, maybe quarterly. I don't know how they're going to do that. It almost seems like, how is that going to be done? Wow.
Well, I mean, you've got a lot of interesting, events within the Beatles, history,
Right.
That I guess you could kind of focus on. I mean, with John, I mean, if they're going to go as far back as they can, maybe, John, John's introduction to Paul, or maybe with meeting Yoko, that story. Oh my. Do you know about the story of John and Yoko meeting? That would be really interesting to see in a movie where John goes to the art gallery. It's Yoko's show. Yep. And there's just a ladder, and it's so out there. But John goes up onto the ladder, and the piece of art, if you could call it that. I mean, I don't judge, but the piece of art that is there, you just go up, and he looked up, and it just said yes.
Yeah, yes, I know.
That was Yoko's exhibit.
Yeah, and it's kind of
and
like
he's like,
of,
I fell in love with Yoko. But that would be interesting to see from John's perspective. Their right. their relationship. I think that maybe for George, because he was such a big part of it, going to India, that was a big influence. Ringo, I'm not gonna lie, I'm not sure what they would do with
Ringo had his own stuff going on all the time. Yeah,
and then with like Paul, Paul, I think was at least very towards the very end, the one who kind of not started the breakup, but was really the one who kind of pushed it because he wasn't really happy. He wanted to do his own stuff.
Right.
Or who knows? Maybe Sam Mendes will, with Paul's perspective, finally, close the case of, is Paul dead?
Oh God, we didn't talk about that. Oh my Lord, how did I forget that?
So what could it be? I'm not sure. I think Sam Mendes is a great director. I think that there is a lot of possibility. But with the size and I think the epicness of the Beatles, it would be it's going to be a very difficult thing to pull off.
Like, how would you cover, like, from perspectives like Shea Stadium? You should they have to. I don't know, man. I don't know where to go with this. It's such an undertaking, to do something like that. I think you're right. Wow. I can't wait till it comes. I can't wait to see this.
Yeah, no, I think it'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah. And speaking, okay, one thing you just mentioned, the Paul is dead thing. That was huge news in '69. I remember through all three networks, CBS, NBC, ABC, a half hour after their 6 o'clock or 6:30 news, it was all about this thing was huge, and the Paul is dead, and we can't go through all the clues. There's 1,000 of them, but if Strawberry Fields at the end, I buried Paul.
Mm-hmm.
You can hear it, and Beatles said, no, actually, it's cranberry sauce, is what we're saying. And then the cover of Sergeant Pepper with the bass guitar, and on the graveyard there, and all that stuff. The Paul is dead, and some people still believe, was it a publicity stunt or?
Well, I mean, if it's true, then whoever they got to substitute for Paul McCartney has done pretty good for himself.
Yeah, I know. He sure has.
But like speaking of clues with Paul is dead, I actually want to go to your favorite album, the shirt that I am wearing, Abbey Road, and I have it here. I have it here, and I wanted to do it.
Yep.
Because what people don't know, of this side, yeah. So what people don't know or may not know is that this is actually a funeral procession.
Yeah.
You have John in white as the priest. You have Ringo in black as the Undertaker. Paul is actually the body, the dead body. He is shoeless, which I believe is actually a tradition in England to bury. And then George is the gravedigger, the worker. So that was just another clue that Paul is dead. But I just think that,
And that Volkswagen behind that, Dave, says 28 if.
Yes.
And then the back said, if you trace it, it says 3 Beatles. Just too many coincidences. I don't know, man. I don't know.
I think that the fact that almost 60 years later, people are still talking about it.
They are.
Good on them.
Yeah, I know. If they enjoy it, I guess so. Yeah.